Did you guys know that Josh Downs is averaging 10 targets in the 2 games that Gardner Minshew has started for Anthony Richardson this year? And now we're getting reports that Richardson is going to miss the entire rest of the 2023 season after undergoing shoulder surgery. So Josh Downs is going to get 11 more games with Gardner Minshew as the starter and is a huge buy low for a potential second half breakout, just like these other 4 players are massive buy lows right now, starting with Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers. Somehow, Aiyuk is still the wide receiver 20 in October DLF ADP, which is absolutely ridiculous given the production that he's had to start this season. 6 or more targets in all 5 games, 2 games over 125 receiving yards, and if you remove the game that he got hurt in and only played half the snaps, he's averaging 18.8 fantasy points per game in the other 4 games, on pace for over 1,500 yards, 7 touchdowns on 85 catches, which would have been good for wide receiver 7 overall in 2022. So not only are you buying wide receiver 1 production at wide receiver 2 prices, but you're also wagering that he'll be in a better situation next season and beyond if he signs to a new team in free agency. Don't get me wrong, I love what he's doing in San Fran right now, but he's also only seeing 7.5 targets per game, which is 25th among wide receivers this year. Imagine if he signed to a new team as their legitimate wide receiver 1, basically becoming like the next Stephon Diggs after what he did going from Minnesota to Buffalo. Like, can you imagine him as Houston's wide receiver 1 with CJ Stroud? Or what about the Chargers, since they can save $43 million next year by cutting both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams? Imagine Brandon Aiyuk in the Keenan Allen role with Justin Herbert, or even just throw him on the Panthers. Let him get all of Adam Thielen's targets that he's seeing this year. See how much better he'd be with 10 targets a game instead of 7.5. So if you're still able to buy Brandon Aiyuk right now for 2024 first, or even like a first and second, or a first and some young wide receiver that doesn't look like he's going to become a thing, like Dotson, Sky Moore, Treylon Burks, Jameson Williams, make that deal immediately. Another good wide receiver buy low is Drake London, because I don't know if people realize what he's been doing the past few weeks, but he is starting to break out this season. Since his week 1 donut with only 1 target, London has quietly averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game, with 2 games over 18 points and only 1 game under 11 points. He's on a 17-game pace of 88 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns on 143 targets since week 2. And all the concerns about Kyle Pitts returning from injury, Bijan Robinson being drafted, and this being a more run-focused offense, none of that has mattered for Drake London because he is an alpha wide receiver in this Falcons offense. In our ADP, he is behind rookies like Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, and Zay Flowers, which doesn't really make sense to me given that London is, 1, outproducing all of them right now, and 2, was a much better prospect than those 3 players coming out of college. So if you've been looking to buy Zay Flowers or buy Jordan Addison, but you can't because of rookie hype and their prices are too inflated, but you want some more production than what JSN is doing right now, Drake London is a perfect trade target for that 1 future first, or Jameson Williams in a second, Nico Collins in a second, Terry McLaurin in a second. There are tons of options for you to go out and get a top 20 wide receiver right now without paying top 20 prices like you would other similar wide receivers. But enough with the wide receivers. What about the running backs? And the one guy that I keep coming back to as a buy low right now, specifically for contenders, is Aaron Jones. His value is so deflated right now because of the injury in week 1. Then he came back. He wasn't good. He only scored 2.5 fantasy points. Then the Packers were on bye last week. So really, Aaron Jones managers just haven't had him in over a month. And I'm sure that they're very frustrated. So now is an excellent time to swoop in and buy low for the second half of the season. Remember, this is a running back who has finished inside the top 10 at the position 4 years in a row, and he's the only running back to do so since 2019. And we still saw it in week 1, 127 total yards, 2 total touchdowns on 11 touches before getting hurt halfway through the third quarter. When healthy, Aaron Jones is still a fantasy RB1, and he's currently valued outside the top 30 in Dynasty in both our ADP and on Keep Trade Cut. You can buy him right now for a single second-round pick. I'd be willing to even pay multiple second-round picks for him, or flip shorter-term producers like Jerome Ford, Rashawn Johnson, maybe move Rashad White for Aaron Jones in a second, Najee for Jones in a pick, Miles Sanders for Jones in a pick. Find a running back who has produced decently over the past couple of weeks, but has a really limited ceiling. Flip him for Aaron Jones. Another running back that I believe is a great buy for both contenders and rebuilders is David Montgomery, which might sound odd either way because for contenders, he's on IR, so he's not helping you win right now by producing points. And for rebuilders, he's a 26-year-old running back. But Look at it from a what he can do for you later mindset. As a contender, sure, it might suck to have to buy him and not get to play him for a month or more, but if you can survive until Thanksgiving and don't really pay a ton to get him, his end of season schedule is really, really nice, with Chicago the week before the fantasy playoffs, Denver the first week of the fantasy playoffs, Minnesota Vikings, which on paper do look pretty tough, but they haven't really played a good running back since week 2 when DeAndre Swift torched them for 175 yards and a touchdown. And then they have Dallas in the fantasy championships. Again, tough on paper, but they did give up 100 yards and a touchdown to James Conner and 120 yards and 2 touchdowns to Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason combined in a massive blowout game. You're buying him for your playoff run, and if your team is good enough to get there, he's going to make it even better. And as a rebuilder, this is all just playing the market right now with the intent to sell him for a profit later this season or maybe even next year once he's producing again. You're trying to buy for a second and you're just trying to flip him for a first later on. Easy as that. So the price to acquire is the same for everybody. I'm trying to pay a couple of seconds or send away those same short-term running backs that we talked about before: Jerome Ford, Roshan Johnson, Rashad White, add in Brian Robinson, Miles Sanders. Honestly, even guys like Dameon Pierce and Najee Harris could also be moved for David Montgomery. Or you can move away Jerry Jeudy, Jahan Dotson, Tank Dell, Romeo Doubs, any player that can give the allure of producing points now, but in the long run aren't really worth all that much as highly replaceable assets. Those are the guys that I'm looking to move for David Montgomery and just waiting until he comes back. But while we're in the trading spirit, Justin recently dropped 2 more trade target videos geared specifically towards contenders and rebuilders, which you guys can check out right over here.